Hi, my name is Raja Choudhury, and I'm a filmmaker. And my new film, America's First Guru, is on PBS. And you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi, everyone. On this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, we share a conversation with filmmaker Raja Choudhury. Stay tuned. You know, I say it every time, and I'll say it again. With all the wonderful guests and all the conversations, the greatest reward always comes from you listening and enjoying. And so thank you for sharing with your friends and family and for following along wherever you might be catching this right now. I truly appreciate it, and if you've been enjoying these, I hope you can also submit a kind rating or review on Apple or Spotify or YouTube or Amazon or any of the places. I've always been fascinated by the energy and spirit in each of us, and particularly what kindles this during our lives. At some point, whether it's through conflict or serendipitous discovery or thoughtful meditation, hopefully everyone realizes that there's a consciousness in each of us, accelerating self-determination and building a spiritual connection with ourselves and the world around us. When I was a kid, like many, I attended weekend classes where we learned about Hindu philosophy and different yoga postures and prayers. But what I enjoyed the most were stories about Swami Vivekananda. Not just because of his incredible distillation of Hindu tradition into a universally applicable practice, but for me personally, because of the role that America had in activating his work, the results of which are being seen today on a global stage. So it was truly great to share a conversation with Raja Choudhury, an award-winning filmmaker whose latest documentary is called America's First Guru, and tells the story of a young and charismatic Swami Vivekananda's travels to the US in the late 1800s, speaking at the first World's Parliament of Religions conference in Chicago, and broadly introducing Hindu philosophy and India's spiritual culture to American audiences. Raja himself spent formative time on many continents, learning to be an architect and developing a spiritual practice of his own that he passionately studies and teaches, with the philosophy of being in the business of bliss. His film, The Quantum Indians, was awarded India's National Film Award in 2014, and now with America's First Guru, which can be found streaming on pbs.org, he showcased a living chronicle of Swami Vivekananda's impactful time in America, his message of universality and acceptance, and the ripple effects seen from the vitality that he sparked at home in India to the cultural seeds he planted in the US. Raja and I caught up for a conversation, and we started by talking about connecting all the dots on moments that helped him decide to make this film.
Good God. This is actually, when I came to New York in 1998, right?
Yeah.
I was not religious. I was practicing meditation and Kriya yoga and other things, but I wasn't religious. And a teacher guide, a friend of ours, Dr. Karan Singh, said, you should go back to what your father was into, which was the Ramakrishna Mission. So I went off to the Ramakrishna Mission in 2000 in Upper East Side in New York,
Yeah.
and it was a little sleepy, beautiful old, building. And I walked in there, and I listened to this Swami talk, Swami Adishwarananda, and he was the most progressive, liberal, wonderful man I'd ever heard talk about spirituality, and I fell in love with him. And so I spent
Yeah.
every Friday and every Tuesday with him. And but then I looked around and I realized that how little people in America knew about Swami Vivekananda, and I kind of pitched it early back then to WNET and others, saying we should do something on this, and but nobody was interested. So
Yeah.
fast forward now, 10 years ago, I pitched it again, still couldn't raise any money. And then 3 years ago, I said, okay, this is it. We were in India for a long time, and I came back to the US in 2021. And I said, that's it. This is the film I'm going to make. First film for PBS. I pitched it to WTTW Chicago, who had said yes before, and they agreed again. And then, boom, that was it. It's like, let's tell the story of the man that brought yoga, Hinduism, Vedanta into the conversation in America. Let's talk about him, you know.
And with that, you mentioned that when you were buoyed a little bit about your father's devotion to Ramakrishna and being in fact exposed to that as a child, when you actually first thought of creating this and really sort of now garnering support for this multiple times, as you just mentioned, right? Was there actually a tug for you that said, "Look, this is something I've probably had dormant in
Hmm.
my head for so long, stemming from childhood to now fast forward to so many times trying to revisit this." Was this sort of a fulfillment in a way of some kind of yearning for you?
Yes, I would agree with that. My father was is a Bengali. I grew up in Africa in a UN family. My father was the WHO, and he
Yeah,
would sit and meditate to that picture of Sri Ramakrishna every day, and I was wondering what he was muttering to himself, and he was doing some japa mantra, and but he taught us some basic pujas and all that, but nothing too
yeah,
major. And I think that if you are Bengali and we'd go back to Calcutta every year. You knew the Kineshwar, you knew Belur Math, you knew everywhere you looked was Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, right?
yeah,
And but I knew the story, Amachitra Katha and all that. Everybody, we all knew the stories, right?
yeah,
Arise, awake, and sisters and brothers of America. Yeah, we knew all the stories, but
sure.
it was there. And then my father went to the same school he went to, which was Scottish Church College in
Ah,
Calcutta, right? So
yeah,
his house where he grew up was about 2 blocks away from our house where my father grew up in Calcutta. So I
right.
think we were predestined to kind of work together. First of all, spiritually, I was drawn very much to his teachings, which were universal and personal and nothing to do with the public showing of my Hindu values. It was much more about
Yeah.
my yoga, my inner work, my Vedanta. And then I was drawn to the story. And so when I became a filmmaker, it was a natural yearning to say, all right, how do we tell this story so that a global audience can watch it? So that's how yes. So it was a very personal thing. It was very personal.
You speak of that universal language and that universal message that's out there. And yet, I'm wondering if it required it to be dormant for a while in order for it to, in fact, build momentum.
Well, I didn't come to my own spiritual and mystical journey until my 30s.
Yeah,
I mean, before that, I grew up a Hindu, attending Diwali and pujas and things like that, and Durga Puja and all of that. But nothing, by my 20s, I had become kind of agnostic, and
yeah,
I was doing martial arts. I was a creative, studying architecture in London. I had no time for all this nonsense, in my 20s, and
right.
and then I started my own company in my late 20s. But by the 30s, I'd kind of had a business go bankrupt, or not bankrupt, but upside down. I was struggling. I didn't want to do substances and acid and alcohol, even though the pull was there. So I decided to return to what I knew, which was puja and meditation, and started reading a lot more. So I read about Kundalini, and in fact, I talk about that and teach that a lot now.
Yeah,
And so I was drawn to the spiritual path in the late 90s. And by the time I got to New York in 98, by that time I was a Kriyaban, which is the Swami Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda school of thinking, SRF. And I'd
yeah,
learned Kriya Yoga, and I was an advanced Kriya Yogi, but it wasn't fulfilling because I wanted something of the heart, something that combined bhakti, yoga, knowledge, pursuits of those things. And this was the pull, And so for
mm,
me, it was a spiritual hero's journey of a Joseph Campbell type, where I had to go through the tipping point, I had to fall off the edge, I
yeah,
had to meet a teacher, and the teacher introduced me to the mysteries, and then boom, the rest is history, and that's how it happened.
yeah. Love that. You were mentioning finding a guru and having this process here. And when it comes to now matching that story with making a film like this, it's one thing to research and study someone. and their teachings, and then integrate that into your practice, your daily life, and become whole. And it's another to present a film about it, right? So were there particular surprises or aha moments that were critical to including the story arc of the film, or critical to in fact developing that story so that it could be shared in a film format?
I think that there are two parts to any storytelling like this, right? And one is the brutal project management of doing something like this. You got to do the research, you got to raise the money, you got to get a production team together. There's it's just so that was the good thing about studying architecture is that you learn project management. You learn how to build a building. So making a film is much less work than building a building, but you learn how to do all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I kind of had DNA of that way of working, of a kind of algorithmic kind of checklist manifesto of things that had to be done. Atul Gawande would be proud of me. I had my checklist manifesto. And
Absolutely.
but on the other side, creativity and storytelling, people think that filmmaking is a creative art. That's about 30% of it, right? The rest of it is
Huh.
a lot of it. I spent half my time raising money on this, right? And
Yeah.
the other half was spent writing, researching, thinking, working with many people, planning the interviews. So we have a craft part we call pre-production, which means that let's say it was 9 years of pre-production to do 1 year of editing and filming in
Right.
that way, right? So all stories, when you see them on the screen or you read them or you experience them on TV or whatever, have had this backstory to them. They have this crafting that
Yeah.
goes on, right? And I would suggest to you that if anybody ever wants to go into filmmaking, you have to learn this craft. Now, the creative process is different. As you said,
Yeah.
the arc is the critical thing. Is that what is the journey you are taking the audience on, right?
Mm.
So you're giving them a premise, you're taking them on a roller coaster ride through history, right? And you're kind of, yes, we used a Ken Burns style of narration and things like that, and we used an actor to play Vivekananda. But I
Yeah.
guess that we were looking for a beginning, a middle, and an end, a three-part structure, right? That would allow you to build up to a story, a tipping point, Chicago. Then you
Mm.
experience what happens to him getting to and through Chicago and after. And then what did he build and what did he do and how did he do all that, right? And then
Right.
you're bringing it to a close by saying, well, what impact did he have? What did he do? What was the result of all this? So you have an arc that really predetermines who you interview, what you're looking for, what footage you want, and that's how I worked on it.
And we're this was not your first rodeo, right? So I mean, you've made films before, but I guess were there particular surprises that came about from this that you were maybe not expecting?
I think there were two main beautiful surprises. One is we worked with a great actor called a New York actor called Samrat Chakrabarti. He's a Bengali as well,
Yeah.
and he kind of looks like Devanand meets you know Devanand meets Swami Vivekananda. He looks like that, right? He's
Yeah.
got that look,
Sure.
and he's a classic actor. Lives the lifestyle, bohemian. The whole thing. And I saw this man transform into Swami Vivekananda and start channeling him. That was remarkable.
Mm.
So just by reading his words, he was educating himself in the philosophy, even though he may have
Yeah.
grown up with it. So just by hearing and practicing and speaking, I saw this man change into a mystic in front of my eyes, right? That was amazing. You
Sure.
know, the other was that we didn't want to film a period drama, right? So we
Right.
treated it like we were interviewing Vivekananda in a black background. We were doing his speeches in a black background. But then when we decided to put him in the city, we put him into modern New York, but dressed as Swami Vivekananda. And that was an experience because, I mean, first of all, New York City, there are enough weird people out there, so nobody minds a crazy guy dressed in an orange turban and a
Yeah.
walking around. But the funny part,
Not really a stretch to film
no,
that.
no, even
Yeah.
the cops were saying, "Hey, how you doing?" Like,
Right. Right.
but the best part was that people were coming up to him, like they'd come up to the Dalai Lama and start bowing to him and asking for blessings and things like that. And he really
Yeah.
took to it. He was blessing everybody.
Which I think is such a nice like way to integrate into the current sort of ongoings of any contemporary city, right? Like
The beauty is that preaching universalism or pluralism in a city like New York is easy because
yeah.
it's such a melting pot, so much madness going on, right? now
Yeah.
now but you take that to a smaller town, right? Midwest, like he did. He went out touring,
Yeah.
right? You take it to the Midwest, and you're kind of dealing with prejudice, you're dealing with ignorance, you're dealing with mythology, you're dealing with all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So I
Right.
think preaching to the city is always easy. That's why he built his first ashrams, his first centers in New York, in Chicago, in Pasadena. It was city. But the moment he
Yeah.
went out into, the country, it was a different story, and I think that that's what we found was that filming in the cities was fun, and we really enjoyed ourselves doing that. So if you watch the film, you'll
Yeah.
see that we have great scenes of him riding the subway and eating, drinking a coffee, and all kinds of stuff, and it was brilliant.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with filmmaker Raja Choudhury. Stay tuned. Every story told is a lesson learned, and every lesson learned is a story waiting to be told. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Krish Ashok, author of Masala Lab, The Science of Indian Cooking, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tam France.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal.
Hi, my name is Richa Morjani, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with filmmaker Raja Choudhury. And when I watched the film, I that certainly resonated with me. And again, also having some background in learning about Ramakrishna ji and Naren and Swami Vivekananda and the stories, and yet also seeing what some of the learnings, my own learnings, were in understanding what his struggles and even some of his accomplishments were in rural places, upstate New
Sure.
York and maybe some of the other places in the United States. I'm curious with a film that is really poised to help people learn. What did you perhaps in fact have to unlearn, either about yourself or even as a filmmaker with this project?
You see, when you make a film about a mythic figure, right?
Yeah,
And to Indians, he's a complete heroic mythic figure. His picture is on every school in India, right?
right,
You cannot
right,
get away from him. He's everywhere, right? Every political party has co-opted him. Every government has worked with him. There's Vivekananda centers to everything in India. It's like,
sure, right,
you know. So when you have a mythological figure like this, if you're going to portray him as a human being, as a man, right? With nuances and subtleties and issues and naiveties and
complexities,
complexities. And when you think about it, people don't know that the entire mission in America was built by women.
yeah,
It was women that supported him when he came to America, and those very women also helped finance the Ramakrishna mission in India. They went there and did the
right,
schools and the printing presses. he believed in women's education. He really, because he grew up a Brahmo Samaj, so he was always keen on that. But until he came to America, he
Yeah.
didn't realize how important it was to run civic society with women, and they could run
Yeah.
everything. And he wanted that for India. So he wanted that. He,
Yeah.
he, he allowed for diversity, a brown man, 1890s America, filling church halls from Idaho to New York City. Quite amazing, right?
Yeah.
And that too, no microphones, no lighting, blaring at the. He had
Yeah.
luckily he had a baritone opera voice, so he could blare. It was like a
Right.
you know. So I think that the immersion into the man was the surprising part for me. Was that I didn't
Mm.
put in all the stories, because he loved ice cream. He was a smoker. There were so many complexities to this man, right? But he was
Yeah.
also this mythical figure, this wonderful, amazing, complex man. So I tried to bring
Yeah.
that into the film. Is that the profound wisdom he brought, but on the other side, that he was just 30 years old and a young man dealing with life, trying to figure it all out.
Right.
It was quite amazing.
Right.
It was quite amazing. Yeah.
You know, I've seen some of your own taglines and mission and values in this lifelong journey towards bliss.
Hmm.
And when you were making this film, was the film itself, the project, the process, was this just yet another step in your own journey towards bliss?
Twofold. One is, I've had the good fortune of being a teacher for the last 5, 6 years, no, 9 years, including Delhi. We were in Delhi, and I was speaking in public and doing events and running classes and workshops. And I come at it from both the Shakti and Vedanta point of view. So I help
Mm.
people find the inner goddess in you, which we call Kundalini or Shakti, and goddess in you. That means that gives you the power to make life wonderful and magical.
Yeah.
But then I also studied Vedanta, which is what is the highest level of my consciousness? Where can I take all this, right? Can I go to this idea of what Swamiji spoke about, which is Tattvamasi, that you are that divine spark from which the whole universe comes into being. So for me, in addition to being just a great story and a great film, this was an extension of my own sadhana and my own teaching, right? And
Mm.
but I get to do it to hundreds of thousands of people,
Right.
but I do it on YouTube anyway to thousands of people. But I love that this is through a man that people know but don't know the full details about, and that was fast.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. And yes, he was speaking my language, so it was just perfect.
First off, I love that because I think it's such a parallel way to both create and also absorb. And in your case, did making the film in any way change this vision? Did it accelerate it in a way? Did it change you for that matter?
One of the stories I'm working on now is on Sri Aurobindo and the idea of what is called the integral yoga. And he spoke about a fascinating subject which came out of Swami Vivekananda's thinking, called psychic evolution, right? That
Mm.
we are all not just biologically evolving into this neocortex filled animal that's trying to figure out identity and consciousness and self identity and all these things, right? We are also seem to be evolving towards some vast mind of a kind of Spinozan god of the universe, this idea of
Yeah.
panpsychism, this idea of a universal God, a God of consciousness, of everything being conscious, right? And which is in Vedanta we call it Brahman, or we call it the Jiva Atma in you, or the Brahman out there. And I think that
Yeah.
that was what's happening, is that it accelerated and enhanced my own psychic evolution even further.
Mm.
So, and hopefully it'll take everybody along with me, along with it, and the next one will do that, and the next one will do that. So that's what I'm after. you know
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what Vivekananda was saying, which I agree with and which I learned from this doing this, is that you got to be a karma yogin, you got to be a raja yogin, you got to be a gyan yogin, and you got to be a bhakti yogin all in one. And then you can figure
Yeah.
it out. You don't have to do one only. That's not needed.
Yeah. They can work with multiplicity and You don't have to do things just simply in serial.
And he said something. He said something very important. He said that a Hindu doesn't have to become a Muslim, or a Muslim a Hindu, or a Christian a Hindu.
Yeah.
Anyone can do these yogas, and anyone can
Yeah.
discover this source wisdom behind everything.
And that's personally from my own perspective, it's personally what I love about Swami Vivekananda, for his plurality, for his pride as a Hindu to come through and with this almost vigor and confidence to both embrace Vedanta and abandon a lot of the ritualism and,
Absolutely.
in a way, hopelessness sometimes of caste oppression and whatnot. Almost a, and especially in those times, right? I mean, such a patriotic call for self determination.
Yes, self-actualization, self-actualization. I
Yeah,
mean, I mean, one thing I'll say is that there are some amazing things he said when he went back to India, right? Which still apply
yeah,
today. He went to Indians and he didn't blame the British, he didn't blame the Muslims, he didn't blame anybody. He says, "You have become weak. You are slaves." You know, so what?
yeah,
How, get up, play football, build your biceps. Before you do Vedanta. There's a famous quote where he said, that play football before you learn the Bhagavad Gita. And
right,
I mean, and
right.
people have always misquoted that, but the real meaning was that vigor, be alive, be a lion
Yeah.
roaring. His famous quote was, "Arise, awake," from the Vedanta, which is Upanishads, which is "Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached."
And I appreciate that so much. I mean, given that backdrop and given this idea of self-actualization, self-determination, was there an intentionality particularly to showcase the American experience of Swamiji and the Americanism that he brought back when he went back to India to sort of have that spirit of really self-awakening?
Mm.
What was the Americanism here? Was that really an intentional punctuation mark on the story you wanted to tell?
When I started working on this many years ago, and then I spoke to PBS about it, the WTTW, my determination was to be the kind of Ken Burns of the Indian American story, right? Which is
Yeah,
that, we have a great diasporic story. We have a great story. We are 2.5 million Indian Americans here. We dominate Silicon Valley. We dominate medicine. Look at you. We dominate with we dominate pharmacies. We dominate hotel industries. We dominate so many worlds, right? And yet we're a tiny
sure.
little ethnic minority that's been coming in spurts through the years, right? But on the other side, we can also be very superstitious, very xenophobic, very kind of insular, right? And our kids are growing up with the kind of desire for American expression and desire, but Indian identity, and not sure where to play, right? So
Yeah,
my big thing about making this film was to show that we can build these bridges between India and America today, and tell Indian
yeah.
American stories from the diaspora's point of view.
And there's so many tentacles back anywhere, both in the diaspora or in the homeland, so to speak, where, this story is I think the resonating power is not only for self awakening here in the States, given what that Indian American experience was for Swamiji, but
All
of
of
what
us.
impact, like you mentioned, that it had in India, and that continues to go on, and why it's so relevant and so important today.
One of the things we found was that we can actually trace the beginning of the NGO movements and the American style foundations and charitable organizations to the Ramakrishna mission, right?
Right,
So he
right.
took back to India not a monastic order that just did puja and meditation, but that served the poor, that built schools, that built organization. And it was the first non-profit foundation in India of that kind.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah,
every NGO that followed can trace their DNA legacy to the American ideas and money brought by Swami Vivekananda to India in the 1890s. So that's also a
yeah.
remarkable
No,
story that we haven't told properly. You know.
you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with filmmaker Raja Choudhury. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Lily Singh, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hi guys, I'm Indra Nui.
Hi, this is Farhan Akhtar.
Hi, this is Madhuri Dixit, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Hi there, I'm Abhay Dandekar, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with award-winning filmmaker Raja Choudhury. You know, there's a fine line sometimes between spiritual awakening and self-realization and, in fact, the very, very lucrative cottage industry of spiritual healing and guidance and for a very thirsty market of consumers, if you will, not just humans, but consumers, right? So I just from your own experiences and making this film and some of the things that you do as well, why do you think Americans trusted Swami Vivekananda in the late 1800s? And why should they be compelled to watch a story like this today?
Well, that's another arc altogether. If you think about it, let's look at it. 1845, Emerson and Thoreau discover the Bhagavad Gita, right? And this is pre-suffragette, pre-women's liberation, pre-LGBTQ, pre-anything allowed to be, right?
Right.
The only place that people of that creative bent, women, LGBTQ, could go was spirituality, right? At that time, right?
Yeah.
So you could go into Christian Science, you could go into spiritualism, you could go into transcendentalism, Unitarianism. In fact, today the most welcoming church in America is the Unitarian Church, because you can have gay marriages there, you can have everything there. It's wonderful. And they
Yeah.
started back then. They were and so they were the ones that welcomed him first after the Chicago Parliament in a big
Mm.
way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was what you could call in America the birth of the spiritual but not religious movement, right? Which
Yeah.
today, now, the current Pew Research shows that 30% of young Americans below 35 do not align themselves to any religion. They're spiritual but not
Yeah.
religious. We call them the unaffiliated now, right? In fact, I'm working on a film on that right now with PBS, right? On the
Yeah.
unaffiliated. And Indian wisdom played such a major role in that, right?
Yeah.
Because we brought yoga, we brought bhakti, we brought karma, we brought all these things into the language that weren't there before, right? And today you could say that yoga practice, sadhana, meditation, hatha yoga, all these things is the third biggest congregation in America. Catholics, Protestants, and then
Mm.
us. It's like yogis.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating that you could be a Jewish heritage or a Catholic and come to yoga, and do it, and I think
Yeah.
that's the impact that we have had in what Indians love to call soft power. This idea of
Mm.
percolating into every aspect of American life has happened.
Yeah.
It's already happened.
Yeah.
So I, as a storyteller, that's wonderful
Well,
because I can tell all these stories. Like
and by the way, is that important to call out and to
to
actually
celebrate,
take a lot of pride in?
to celebrate,
Yeah.
to celebrate.
Yeah.
Mainly because as you and I both know, when Indians diasporas settle down anywhere, the first stage is we go through an ultra conservative stage where we kind of try and protect everything we thought of as valuable as Indian in a kind of, oh my God, this is sacred, and we end up falling behind even where India has gone. We've kind of,
Mm.
completely, we're more conservative than
Yeah.
the Indians are, like it's really bizarre. But the second part, the next generation then begins to embrace the multi pluralism of this whole beautiful thing, right? And then the
Yeah.
third generation grows up in a world where being Indian, being yogi, being cool is cool. Everybody's fine with it, and I think that
Yeah.
that's where we are now, and that's wonderful.
Lots of full circles there,
Oh my
right?
God. And just imagine, so he comes in 1893, triggers that revolution, and we're benefiting from it now. So, and we can
Yeah.
celebrate it.
Yeah. I think about that, and I heard a TED talk that you gave where you talk about a lot of this, right? And really the all the signals of that soft power, whether it's that the concept of tattvamasi, of karma yoga, of yoga in general, of conscious evolution and satchitananda, bliss, all being these pillars of Indian wisdom, right? Are therefore, whether we label them as these pillars or not, is therefore Indian wisdom and Hindu wisdom essentially the same thing?
But, if you live in India, and I spent 14 years in India, at the end, this last 14 years of my life, I was in India before I came back in 21. And because I raised
Yeah.
my daughter there, we had our daughter there, and she went to an American school in Delhi, but we grew up India. It was like a weird
Yeah.
schizophrenia we were enjoying in Delhi, that kind of thing. But
Right.
but what it was that India doesn't think about its identity in that way. Day to day life of Indians is not waking up in the morning and saying, I'm a Hindu, I'm doing this now, this is Hindu. The average Indian lives philosophically without even knowing that they're doing it, right? Whether they're
Mm.
Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, we're all enjoying dharma in our own ways. Even the agnostics and atheists are enjoying it in the same way, right? There's a kind of
Right.
there's a dharma to it, a kind of universal law to it, right? That we abide by
Yeah.
and follow. And I think that that's what we are doing here is we're kind of working with a principle that's not about Hinduism per se, because you wouldn't have a Hindu unless the British decided to call us Hindus in that way, right? You
Well, Sanatan Dharma, whatever, right?
Sanatan Dharma,
Uh,
even that was Shankaracharya, and the the beauty of Sanatan Dharma, even that, forget that, the universal law. You could have been a tantric, a sankhya, a Gnostic. You could have been agnostic. You could have been atheist, and still be considered part of the Indian philosophical wisdom, right?
Absolutely.
There was no,
Yeah.
Buddha and the Brahmins all sat side by side and preached and sold in the marketplace
Yeah.
of Benares. They were selling quite happily, right?
With that, in certainly in Swamiji's time, right? As he was trying to kind of, as you said, independent of the labels here, but just of the pillars that are there, there was an element of patriotism to this, right? I mean, this is my
Absolutely.
land. This is right. This is where I belong, and making sure that in fact those principles and those pillars of self-actualization are so important also to your own, not just personal pride but your civic pride as well. And
Absolutely.
in a way, was that therefore whatever you call this wisdom, is that what's perhaps needed for people to gain that self-determination and that self-actualization, or does it require that you have to call it something?
I think that in 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 Hindu philosophy, we say that we're stuck in the maya of nama rupa, which means we give everything name and form. If it doesn't have a name and form, we don't know how to attach ourselves to it or identify with it. You know,
Yeah.
Now, the highest degree of Vedanta or philosophy is dissolution of name and form into the pure consciousness of the universe, right? Now, that, let's say
Mm.
that's our highest watermark, right? That's where we all want to swim. We can't swim there, but we want to swim there,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
At the lowest thing is your local goddess worship in a forest or whatever you're doing. That is
Right.
the same, just two different ends of the spectrum, right? In
Yeah.
between, you can have 5 times a day nawaz of the Muslims, or you can have Buddha mindfulness and vipassana. You can have all the spectrums in between, right? From pure
Yeah.
total consciousness to this rock is worship. I worship this rock right now, right? And we can do
Yeah.
the whole thing. Isn't that wonderful that you can do that in India?
Yeah.
I know I used to go every year to visit my parents in Calcutta, and they live outside in Kalyani, and there was a
Yeah.
tree in this park nearby, and somebody had done a puja and put a rock there. Right? It was just a rock, right? I
Yeah.
watched it over 10 years become a temple, right? To this.
Yeah. Right.
I love that's why you have to love India, that we combine the rational and the irrational in the most profound and beautiful way in the world. And that's the beauty of India. Now, one thing you said earlier is very important. He was a patriot, he wasn't a nationalist, right? you know
Yeah.
and patriotism has been confused with nationalism in the last few years, and I didn't want to talk about it, but he was a patriot. He really believed
Yeah.
in the beauty of India. He really believed that
Yeah.
little triangle of geography gives the world the most beautiful ideas possible. Even Islam
Yeah.
comes into India and becomes magical Sufism. Even Buddhism becomes Mahayana in India. Even or so to a really philosophical Indian, Buddhism, Sufism, all Hinduism, all part of Hinduism, all part of Sanatan Dharma, all the same, no big deal, right? And that's how we should treat it.
No, and I appreciate that, so much, especially in thinking about that kind of patriotic awakening and what it means to people. With even Quantum Indians and now America's First Guru, they're both inspiring and they're both educational. And so, what do you hope is also empowering now about this film, especially for those who might be learning about Swami Vivekananda for the very first time?
Before I answer that with Vivekananda, let's go back to Quantum Indians for a second. When I did it, you know, I did the film on Raman, Bose, and Saha, right? And now that film is shown at majority of science universities every year as a kind of on National Science Day. It's kind of shown, right? And
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of people have seen it. It has been used to return India to basic research science as a kind of one of the tools, right? So, from an activist point of view, it was unintentional on my part. I thought I was telling a good story about three great scientists who did amazing
Yeah.
work with no money in India, and look what they did, and they did, right? And now it's become a kind of clarion call for funding research, funding good science,
Yeah.
and so the consequences of a good story have many ripples, and you can't plan them all, right? the,
Right.
ma- the main thing we're doing with America's First Guru, and I'm traveling around the country doing it now. I'm doing it at Harvard, I'm doing it at Asia Society on the 17th of June, I did it at Princeton, I'm doing it at Stanford soon, I'll be doing it everywhere.
Yeah.
Is I'm taking this on the road to have a conversation like we are having. you know if that leads to young people, to older people with dogmatic ideas, to people with fixed ideas, having a conversation, one of the things that Swami Vivekananda said was that I don't want you to be tolerant. I want you to accept all, we Indians accept all teachings, all religions as true, right? So
Mm.
acceptance is different because tolerance says, I am superior to you, but I'll embrace what you allow you to do what you're doing, right?
Right.
Acceptance says you and I are the same divine spark. We are the same
Yeah.
beautiful source of everything. And so I accept you, even though you and I don't have to believe in the same thing, you know. And that was his
Yeah.
great message of pluralism that's so missing in the world today. And we need to, that conversation we're starting now. And that's, so if I have anything that comes out of this, I hope we have better conversations now.
Yeah, well, as we always say, at least on this podcast, that conversation is the antidote to apathy. And on top of that, I do hope that those conversations are empowering for people to really appreciate the story of Vivekananda and all of your forthcoming stories as well. Raja, thank you so much for joining us.
My
This was
pleasure.
really a treat, and I hope we can visit with you again down the line.
Absolutely. Blessings to everybody.
Thanks so much again, Raja. And please check out America's First Guru as it is streaming live on pbs.org, and the links are also in the show notes. Big shout out to those who just graduated these past few weeks, especially the one in my house. Whether you're paying attention to T20 ICC cricket or politics, or anything in between, please don't forget to submit a kind rating or review for the show and pass it along to your friends and family. Till next time, I'm Abhay Dandekar.